And so with the dresser fully glued up now and in its finished state, we can now move on to doing the other components of it, which are the drawers and the tabletop. And so for the bottom 3 drawers, they're all going to be 8 inches tall. Now, I only have a 6-inch jointer, which leaves me with a little bit of a problem. I now have to somehow flatten and join these 8-inch wide boards. And so the best way to do that is with a router flattening jig like I've got set up here. So this is just a 3/4 sheet of MDF where I've ripped off the outer factory edges and then screwed them back onto the side to create a depth. And then I've gone in and I put in this little shelf piece which gets it up to a 4/4 piece, and I've got my router on a little sled here and I pass it back and forth with a big old slab flattening bit in there, and that will take it down to a fairly precise thickness all the way across. And so this will exactly mimic jointing the board. It will give me a perfectly flat face on this side, then I can run it through my planer nice and easily, and it will make sure that the other side is perfectly parallel to this side and give us our accurate thickness. And so I've already gone through and cut the tails that are going to make up our half-blind dovetails on the front. Now we have to go through and cut the tails that are going to make up the through dovetails on the back side. And so the only trick back here is I don't want my dovetails to go all the way down to the bottom. What I'm looking for here is for there to be a gap at the bottom where I can then cut grooves to put in a removable drawer bottom. And so anytime you're making a fine piece of furniture like this where you've got nice dovetail drawers, you always want to make sure that the bottoms are replaceable, because it's a good chance that somebody at some point in time in the history of this thing is going to put something in that drawer that's going to be too heavy and they're going to break out the bottom of the drawer. And so the way we do this is we start by setting the marking gauge to a 1/2 inch. So I've got my marking gauge set up to that 1/2 inch depth, and I'm just going to go in, make sure I'm on the bottom side of the side panels, and I'm just going to mark a line. So when we're cutting our tails, we're going to end up cutting straight down on that line to create the clearance. Then what we want to do is we then want to stack our 3/16, which is what we used as our spacing on all the other tails here, on top of our 1/2 inch, and then we can reset up the marking gauge. And so I'm not actually going to mark it, but you guys can see how much of a difference there is. That gives us our 3/16 gap. So then that gap that's between this bottom piece and there will match the same gap that's up on our top of our tails. And so the reason we're doing this is because we want to make sure that we have that extra square pin at the bottom of these dovetails. So the back panel, when we put it on, it'll come right up to here, and then this pin will stick into an empty spot that we will then cut the back panel down to match up to that pin. So you guys will see it as we go through. We did it on the last project on the pie cupboard. On those drawers, I did it the same way. It worked out really well. And so then when you're using your wing dividers to lay out your dovetails, if you want to keep your dovetails nice and centered, what you want to do with the wing dividers is start with that second line you marked in. That's a 1/2 inch plus that 3/16 inch in from this bottom edge. And then when you use that measurement, then when you go across, you'll end up with nice, evenly spaced out dovetails, the same as we have on the front. And so on the back here, we're only going to go with 3 tails just to simplify it. They're going to be much wider than they are on the front, but it's just going to be a lot faster to cut out and clear out that material. And because these are through dovetails on the back here, it's just going to make it a little bit easier. I can get through them a little bit faster. Alright guys, so before we get going with the dovetails here, I've decided to make a little bit of a purchase yesterday when I started working on these. So behind me on the table saw here, you can see the first drawer that I did yesterday. Now, doing the half-blind dovetails on these things is very, very hard. There's 5 of them on each front edge, and so that's a lot of material to get through. And so what I found is that the first corner I did, this corner right here, took me almost 4 hours to get done. Now it's very typical, the first time you're doing a joint in a new material. I don't work in maple very often, and this is my first time ever cutting dovetails into it. So I was expecting it to take a while, but 4 hours was a little bit much. Then I decided that this was probably the time to go out and purchase one of these guys. This is a compact router. This one in specific is the Bosch Colt. And the reason I wanted this is purely for cleaning out the waste on the dovetails, both the through and half blind area. And so what's really great about this method is you're still doing the traditional method of working with a handsaw and cutting those lines super accurately. It's all still hand done, but you have the added benefit of doing the annoying part, which is always clearing out the waste with a power tool like this. And so I'll show you guys the process for how this router works, but we're just gonna go through the steps so far. So you always wanna start off by cutting your tails to fit your pieces. Obviously we have the ones that are gonna be our half blinds are a little bit shorter. Our ones that are going through are a little bit longer. I've then gone through and transferred the tails onto our front and back pieces. So this is one of the back pieces. So these are going to be our through dovetails. And you can see everywhere where there is not tape is the sections that we're going to clear out. And so on the through dovetails, all we need to do to get them ready to clear out with the router is we just need to cut these lines down. So everywhere where there's not tape, we're just going to cut a straight line down, and then we'll cut across with the fret saw to clear out that big chunk of material, because trying to cut all this out would just be a little bit much for a router. And so one of the big benefits of using a router like this to cut to your baselines is that you get a perfect baseline measurement across all of your pin boards. So this drawer that I have behind me here, it's sitting perfectly flat on my table saw, no rocking, no movement whatsoever, because all of those baselines are perfectly square. All the inside corners are also perfectly square. I can hold my square up to them and they all reference as square. Alright, so I have all three of the main drawers fitted up. They all slide in and out very nicely. They all fit in pretty much a perfect way in here. The only problem is I still don't have a back panel, so they can kind of go a little bit further back than they should. So we're going to have to do the back panel still. We still have the top of this thing to get done, as well as the top two drawers. And so because this is my first time making a dresser, these are the largest drawers I've made, so they were quite complex to get right, but I think that I did a pretty good job of them. Again, they slide in and out nicely, and I think that they will hold stuff functionally. So that is pretty much all you can ask of a drawer. I also went in and installed all of the drawer slides, what's actually supporting the drawers. And like I mentioned early on in the video, they are just a hair above the actual front and back stretcher line. So the drawer is mainly riding on these small stretchers that are just held in with screws. That way, if I ever need to take them out and replace them as they wear down, it's very easy to do so.